Hey Ecofictologists! It has been a hot minute since I've been in front of this camera posting on this channel anything other than an interview. And you will find out why in a couple videos time. But for now, I am behind woefully on my reading roundup book reviews, several months behind. And when I say several months, I mean like 6 to 9 months. Depending how you look at it. I meant to finish 2022 with monthly reading roundups. I did not do that. And so now I'm finishing them. I am giving you book reviews of the rest of the books that I read in 2022 so that by the end of this video you will know what my favorite book of 2022 was, what my favorite ecofiction novel of 2022 was. Because I know you've all been waiting for it, right? With bated breath, you were waiting for it. So this is basically a quarterly roundup rather than a monthly roundup because we are going to cover October, November, and December. Oh God. We have a lot to get through, so let's get started. So for October, we are starting off with Petal to the Metal, which was the first book in the Bloomin' Psychic series by Annabelle Chase, and it is pretty much on this list so that I can complain about it. I thought this would be ecofiction tangential because it's all about someone who has a psychic connection with plants, and it's a cozy mystery and things. I thought that would be a cool spin on it, an ecofiction cozy mystery. But that wasn't explored at all in the first book, so this first book is not ecofiction at all. Maybe further down the line in the series it will be, but I don't think I will stick around long enough to find out. The main character, Mia, really started to grate on me. She's an incredibly judgmental main character, and even though reading through some of the reviews and comments on the Goodreads page, it sounds like that's supposed to be part of her character arc and that, you know, she gets better as it goes on, but my goodness, it was irritating. For the first third of the book, I was like, okay, I can giggle about this is fine. And then it just became so overwhelming and so negative towards herself, her body image, but also towards other people and their belief systems or the way they live their lives. And I just, you know what, it was too much for me. I checked out. And my biggest complaint is one that I can't even share because it's a complete spoiler for the entire book, which is the ending. I did not like the ending. I did not like how this mystery was solved. I found it incredibly unsatisfying. So this book left me angry. And I'm mostly furious because I love the names of the rest of the books in this series. This is called Petal to the Metal. The next one is called Life's a Birch. There's one called Kiss My Ash. I mean, come on. I want these books. I want to like these books, but I don't think I'll continue in this series, so I'm gonna have to let that go. I don't usually go negative on this channel, but it made me angry. Moving on. The next one is A Rant of Ravens, which is the first in the Birdwatcher Mysteries series by Christine Goff. This book follows Rachel, who spends some time on her Aunt Miriam's ranch in Colorado and gets involved in a birdwatching group because her aunt is involved. And she stumbles upon the body of a reporter in the woods who has been nosing around, poking around, asking her aunt some questions about her late husband and some potentially illegal dealings. This, of course, puts Miriam right into the spotlight in the eyes of the police, and so Rachel has to investigate in order to clear her aunt's name. This is ecofiction because it's all about birds, it's all about the trafficking of rare birds, and I did enjoy those aspects of it, but I wasn't really swept away by this book. It was enjoyable, but I didn't feel compelled to pick up the next one in the series. We'll put it that way, and I don't think I will, even though I like the premise. And it sounds like the rest of the books in the series are from different protagonists' perspectives, which would be interesting, but I don't think it's for me. That being said, I obviously enjoyed A Rant of Ravens more than I enjoyed Petal to the Metal, so A Rant of Ravens is my favorite book in October. That was quick and easy. Let's keep going. The first book I read in November was Sphinx by Andrea Dejean, and this book was sent to me by the publisher, Middle Creek Press. Thank you so much for sending it to me. That was incredibly generous, and I very much enjoyed reading it. And quick heads up, I also have an interview with Andrea Dejean coming. She was wonderful to speak to, and I very much enjoyed that interview, so I hope you do too. Sphinx is a novel about the impact of industry on some of the world's most remote forests, in this case, French Guiana. Our main character, Polly, is out there doing research. She's collecting specimens of a sphinx moth for her professor, who, incidentally, is everything I hate about academia. All bundled up into one character that I could very conveniently hate. This book was really interesting. It did take me a minute to get into because Polly is also not an entirely likable character. She's a bit selfish, she's always drinking, she doesn't really take care of herself. Her friends have to take care of her, going out of their way to do so. She creates some problems for them. But as the book goes on, the reader really sees her growing up, really. And coming into herself and becoming a bit more aware and coming out of her self-centered little bubble. I did get kind of exasperated with her at some points, and then it was nice to see that the place she was in was having this kind of effect on her. While she's in the forest, she gets shot at in the dark, and it happens a few times, and so she and her friends kind of take it upon themselves to protect this forest around them and also the refugees that are living along the river. What I particularly loved about this book was that it communicated this idea of indicator species as species that if something is wrong with them, you know there's something wrong with like the whole ecosystem. It taught you a lot about the moths, the Sphinx moths that they were studying, and it really gave you a love for this place, this forest that they were in. It satisfied all of my nerdy requirements for ecofiction, and knowing that the author herself has been to this place and experienced this area and seen the conflict firsthand, it just gave it so many layers of depth. And if you want to hear more about that, don't you worry, because it's coming in the interview. I did struggle a little bit with the way that it was written in third person present. It didn't take me very long to read, even though it's a chunky book. Actually, where is it? I should be holding it. See, you can tell that I haven't done this in a while, because I should be holding the book. Where are you? D. Okay, Sphinx. It's been a while, okay. Here's the book, Sphinx by Andrea Dejean. So it is, it is chunky, but it didn't take me that long to read, and just every now and then I got kind of chucked out of the prose a little bit. But all in all, I'm very happy that I picked this up. I'm very grateful that Middle Creek Press sent it to me, and I'm very grateful that the author, Andrea Dejean, joined me for an interview. We had a great conversation, so come back next week, I think, to see that. The next book that I read in November was Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I read this as part of the Rewilding Our Stories book club, so if you want to join a book club that's all about ecofiction, find the link to the Discord Rewilding Our Stories in the description below. It was delightful. It's about a tea monk living in a kind of utopian future, but they do feel a little bit of melancholy about what they've lost. Even in a utopian future, you still acknowledge that you've lost something. And so when a robot crosses their path, the interaction is just great. The robot is on a search for what do humans need. It's like a duty that they've been tasked with to check in on the humans every few centuries. I love the voice of it. It does feel very solar punky because it is talking about this utopia, but it still acknowledges that a utopia doesn't mean lack of conflict necessarily. It doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't have to mean perfect. And there are still things that we might have lost along the way to get to a utopia. But I would absolutely call it cozy. It was so cozy. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. One of the places that this coziness comes from is from the tea ceremony that our main character is traveling around doing. They have a tea wagon and they simply go around setting up in the different villages, listening to people's problems and making tea. I love everything about this vibe. Tell me your troubles. What's troubling you today? Oh, don't worry, I have a tea for that. I would love that in my life. so much, it would be great. I also love the attention to food and cooking in this book. That also made it feel very cozy to me, and some of the conversations that happen between the tea monk and the robot happen while over food, and trying to explain a way of life is so interesting. It was great. Just it's a novella. You can pick this up and read it in like 2 days, and it's great, so I would recommend it. And because Psalm for the Wild Built was so heartwarming and charming, it is my favorite book of November. If I could incorporate that tea ceremony in my life, I would. And I think Psalm for the Wild Built also tops A Rant of Ravens, so that is the winner of this matchup. On to December. So the first book I read in December was How to Bury Your Dog by Ava Silverfine, which was sent to me by the author, so thank you very much for sending it to me. And I am very aware of how long it has taken me to get this review out, so I do apologize for that, but thank you for sending me your beautiful book. The first thing that happens, and this isn't a spoiler because it's in the title of the book, is that the main character, Lizzie, needs to put down her dog and bury him in the garden. So basically I was in tears by page 2. And when Lizzie didn't cry when burying her dog, I immediately did not trust her. I had intense distrust of this main character, who could remain dry-eyed while burying her dog. But she did grow on me for the rest of the novel. We also meet her 16-year-old neighbor Jonas and her 10-year-old neighbor Timmy. Sometimes I felt that their voices lost their ages a little bit. They became very philosophical and you kind of didn't know how old they were anymore. But it was very interesting to get their perspective on the problem, which was that the land around their beautiful pond in this town was going to be developed, most likely destroying the ecosystem around the pond and in the woods. Lizzie and Jonas take part in an action to stop the development, and the reader really gets to see how difficult that is. Everything is stacked against them. Developers want it, politicians, well, obviously developers want it, but politicians want it, some neighbors want it, there are some old family ties to the developer, there's a lot of kind of inter-town politics and drama. And I think that's what I liked most about this book, is that it highlighted these local issues and what it takes and how hard it is for people to fight for their own little oasis against this power that is development and politics. I don't know if I was completely on board with the ending, and there were a couple points of like magical realism that I was very surprised by. I wasn't expecting any magical realism in the book, so they kind of threw me when I came across them. I don't think they were necessary really in the book, but all in all, it was a charming read and I really enjoyed it. So thank you again, Ava Silverfine, for sending it to me. The next book I read was House of Drought by Dennis Mombauer, which was sent to me by the publisher Stelliform Press. It's a very quick read, but do not let that fool you. This book packs a punch in a very short space of time, and it gives you shivers. It is beautifully eerie, as Stelliform Press describes it. I think that's a perfect description. I don't read that much eco-horror, which I do think this is, but this book just gave me the spooks in like the most beautiful way, which is not something I think I've ever said about a book. It follows several perspectives and like kind of intermingling storylines. So it's a novella, but it tells you 6 stories, which is quite impressive. And it's about this colonial style house, mansion really, that's built on the edge of a jungle. And the jungle really doesn't like it. It's called the House of Drought, or the Dry House, because it sucks the water out of everything. And the fields and lands around it are struggling under climate change, and so this house has become like this thing of legend. This book made me so thirsty, and at the time I was doing renovations in my own house, and I was pulling down plasterboard, so there was this like fine dust of plaster everywhere that like made my hands dry and my lips dry, and at the same time I was reading this book about a house sucking you dry, and it was just a little bit meta for me. It was just coming into my life in a way that I wasn't quite comfortable with. But it did make it a truly transcendent experience. So thank you very much to Stelliform Press for sending this to me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for my nightmares. The last book that I read in 2022 was Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. Oh my goodness. This was a fantastic book, and also made me want to die inside a little bit. Our main character, Franny, is a scientist who has gone to Greenland in order to travel with potentially the last Arctic terns on potentially their last migration south to Antarctica. There is an intense feeling of despair in this book. It's set in a near future where we have all but lost most of our species, and there is this really heavy grief in many senses of the word throughout the book, really. Trigger warnings and content warnings galore, everybody. Like, I don't know if there's any trigger warning that isn't in here. It was a lot. Charlotte McConaughey, if you remember my review of Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey, you'll already know that she doesn't really hold back when it comes to giving her main characters, like, truly traumatic backstories. It really hurts to read these books, but my god, they're beautifully written. I devoured it. I completely devoured it, and you learn so much about Arctic terns, which means my, like, science communication heart was happy, even though the rest of me was crying. So painful, yes. Beautiful, absolutely yes. Would I recommend it? Yes. But take care of yourself first. If there are topics that are sensitive, maybe this is not the book for you. So my favorite book of the month. It is actually quite difficult to choose between The House of Drought and Charlotte McConaughey's Migrations, because they both gave me such visceral reactions. I can't even speak about them. But I think from chapter 1, Migrations had me hooked. I was in. And I think Charlotte McConaughey has become an auto-buy author. Even though I know I'm in for a lot of pain when I read these books, I'm still annoyed that Once There Were Wolves is not on the tournament board at this point, because it had to be in the same month that I read Limbo. But you know, we're not bitter about it. So, Migrations was the last book that I read in 2022, and I think it was my favorite book of December. Now, the competition between Migrations and A Psalm for the Wild-Built is difficult, because I have to choose between, like, coziness, heartwarming, joy, and, like, this soul-destroying grief, but absolutely gorgeous prose of Migrations. And if you ask me at different times of year, maybe this answer would change. Like, can I only handle coziness right now, or can I handle a little bit of trauma? And actually filming this video, like, 6 months later, Migrations has stayed with me more. Like, I can still feel everything that I felt when I read that book, so it has really lingered with me. And so for that reason, I think Migrations wins this matchup as well, and because the leaderboard is not perfect, the matchup is the same for the next round, so it wins that one too. Nice and easy, keep things moving. So now, after a year and a half of what should have only lasted a year, we can finally decide what my favorite ecofiction novel of 2022 actually was. First, the second semifinals. A Murder of Crows by Sarah Yarwood Lovett versus Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. What a matchup. So these are definitely two of my favorites of last year, so this is a fair fight. Both of them gave me the nerdiness I wanted. I learned something from both of them. One of them was about bats, one of them was about birds. I enjoyed them both, but A Murder of Crows did not make me want to die inside from the main character's backstory. So I think A Murder of Crows wins this second semifinals. Now, my favorite book of 2022. I have to choose between my darlings. I have to choose between Limbo by Esther Figueroa and A Murder of Crows by Sarah Yarwood Lovett. How am I supposed to do that? I can't do that. How am I supposed to make that choice? The next time I do something like this, I'm gonna rate each book so that I don't have to make any decisions. The maths will do it for me. So I know I don't have to do this. I think the only way that I can choose between these two books, which really are both fantastic books, because of what I write when I write ecofiction. At the moment I'm working on an ecofiction murder mystery. So I think A Murder of Crows by Sarah Yarwood Lovett is going to be my favorite book of last year. Yeah, that feels good. Limbo will forever have this incredibly joyful place in my heart, but I think I'm going to reread A Murder of Crows several times. And I don't reread books, really. So that's saying a lot. So, your winner, my favorite ecofiction novel of 2022, is A Murder of Crows by Sarah Yarwood Lovett. And you can go and watch the interview with her, which was wonderful for me, which is up on the channel. And you should go read this book, because I love it, clearly. So I guess that's it. That's the end of my 2022 monthly wrap-ups, which we are finishing in July 2023. I hope you've enjoyed watching and listening to me talk about books. I would love to know what your favorite ecofiction novel was last year, or you can even extend it to now. What is your favorite ecofiction novel that you can think of? And let me know, because I would love to hear about it. And I think that's all from me, so I will see you in the next one. Ecofictologists? Ooh, can you hear that plane? Can you hear the plane? Wait for it. Just wait for it. Oh, plane? Helicopter. Helicopter, I think. Goodness me. Are you hovering over my house?